Mortal Kombat. The shock that the Mortal Kombat series needed in order to keep the vitality of the franchise afloat. Alongside of that, this game introduced a whole new generation of players that didn't have the privilege of experiencing in the arcades back in the original 3 or the PlayStation 2 era. The series is basically dead in the water for nearly 10 years at this point. The last good game, in my opinion, before this one would be Deadly Alliance, which came out in 2002. General interest in the series has been taking, and it was blatantly obvious to everyone, including the developers. For MK9, they tried to follow their competitors in footsteps, Capcom, with Mortal Kombat vs. DC. Someone that's ever played the game, I can tell you that certainly does not captivate my interest. To be fair, this is the first Mortal Kombat game to introduce a full-fledged and complete story with cutscenes and official endings without having to guess using the towers. Other than that, everything was basically disappointing. The roster was severely limited, only about 10 characters from both DC and MK, so a lot of iconic favorites were left out. Of course, other icons were still there, like Mortal Kombat Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Baraka, while DC had Batman, Green Lantern, and Superman. I'm pretty sure I don't need to mention how dumbed down the fatalities are, but in any other game, if Sub-Zero were to freeze a guy solid and then punch them, they would just turn into a giant puddle of blood and guts. But here, they just turn into an ice cube and just simply shatter with a little blood spurt at most. People on the DC side, like the heroes and whatever, instead of fatality, they just have a hero brutality, which is an even more toned down finisher. The MK side has already got. The game was rated T, so the typical Mortal Kombat charm of the brutality is, not even here. Kind of feeds the whole part of the series. Won't lie, the story didn't have me interested either way. It was cool seeing characters from both medias coming together and interacting, but the fan service doesn't exactly make up for everything else. Although watching Superman learn that the MK cast can use magic is entertaining, especially when he encounters Superman. If anyone doesn't know, Superman is vulnerable, not weak, but he's just vulnerable to magic. At the end of the day, though, this game wasn't that bad for the company at large. The reviews were either mid to good at best. It was one of the highest selling games that Midway's ever released in a very long time. However, it was a telling sign that this company needed to start over, at least give the franchise a new spin, which is exactly what they did with Mortal Kombat 2011. This is simply a return to basics and actually a sequel, while being considered a reboot. The story starts right off the end of Mortal Kombat Armageddon with Raiden Shao Kahn, or all that's left, and obviously Kahn is overpowering and dominating Raiden. However, Raiden, being the sore loser that he is, restarts the timeline, or at least sends his memory back to a younger version of himself, the Raiden of MK1 to be exact. As mentioned previously, now this is officially story mode and no longer the endless towers of questioning, because we have an official canon, which likely was 99% of the time going to be Liu Kang anyway, but point being, story was a retelling of the first 3 games, however now the warp changes due to the wisdom and memories of future Raiden's experience. For example, Kung Lao dies way earlier in the MK2 section of this game, while rather he lives past MK3 and onwards. And Zero and Smoke switched places between getting cyberized by the Grandmaster's plan. This game also went back to the classic 2D playstyle that this game series was originally known for. In addition to that, the PlayStation 2 games did have multiple weird fighting styles that I didn't really like or get too invested in, but now everyone, quote-unquote, has, I'll just say, one fighting style. Now, since this is the first game without DC characters for Brutalized, it gets back to that M rating that everywhere all over the arena. I mean that literally. And these fatalities have never been brutal and graphic until this game. I mean, that makes sense. With new generation comes new technology. The series improved quite a bit, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a reboot and in fact a return to form, but that also comes with revamps and additions that I enjoy a lot. First thing is that it's still in effect to this day, that being the power bar in the bottom corner of the screen. Don't exactly know their names, but you get it. This allowed for countless possibilities while engaging combat. You can either combo breakers or extenders, which also allow for better combos this time, since some that can reach to a whopping 40%, which is pretty insane, even now. But when that bar fills up, you can do what's called a super sweep. What? You can do a X-ray or a fatal blow, it depends on the game. but point being that if you land the blow, it's guaranteed at least 30% of the damage to the enemy's health. To make it even better, you can land at the end of the combo to do even more damage. Not only the gameplay changes are what were added, and also expansion on multiplayer. New modes and quote-unquote rooms are available. My personal favorite is King of the Hill. These new additions allowed for players to get into a lobby with more than 8 people instead of just the regular 2. This also introduced the idea of DLC characters in the game, which made it so that people could get more characters without needing to buy a whole new game, like how MK3 ended up going Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and MK4 had the gold expansion pack. But alongside DLC characters came guest characters, the first of which being Freddy Krueger, which kind of sucked. You know, it was still first time and a lot of potential, obviously, seeing where it is now, but PlayStation players got the Kratos as a console exclusive, which I think fits perfectly considering his character. The general public reception, to the surprise of no one, was obviously really well received. Reviews for this game were very high and still considered one of the best Mortal Kombat games and fighting games ever made. This goes for both casual and hardcore fans of the series. There's several reasons for this, of course: the roster, the new features, the new story mode, and the brutality. MK9's roster is undoubtedly the greatest there is within the 20 span of this. It had characters from all 3 original games, and Kenji, Freddy Krueger, and a new character named Scarlet, who was sadly butchered in MK11 and was treated very poorly. But anyway, the brutality of this game was elevated to new depths that would make the congressmen of the original MK games cry themselves. So bad that YouTube age restricts the videos with any fatalities or x-rays that aren't censored if you need any more convincing. It also helps that every hit actually matters, since at the end of the game, the characters will be beaten up with blood and bone exposed, which sadly they got rid of that within later games. But Mortal Kombat hasn't gotten as brutal and intense as MK9. That's what I firmly believe. However, MK1 seems to be going back to those level of raw brutality, which I loved. But the futures, the brand is, with no secret to anyone, going to continue after MK9 and probably still on for another few years, if maybe a decade or 2. Likely people behind it, especially Ed Boon, decided to keep the classic style with a more modernized take. The game is relatively easy to pick up for newer players, thanks to the game's recently added like quick menus and all that. Makes the game a lot more forgiving and handholding. There's currently a large market of interest watching 2 people beat the shit out of each other ruthlessly. I find rather humorous. Considering the fact that Mortal Kombat is one of the biggest names headed at the EVO tournaments, pro gamers only continue to show off and go mega sweaty. I am still shocked watching.
Who cares? I wouldn't be surprised if Fox goes for another one. But this time the throw tech. A challenge, a trade, but again, no tech. He's happy to take the damage. He'd rather Sonic Fox be minus and then take a turn. But no! He challenges! And right here, what is going to happen? Oh my goodness! Sonic! It's gonna make Nicola blink!
It wasn't only the gameplay that was revamped and modernized, it was also the story. With the fanbase larger than ever, the story was written by NetherRealm expanded within the last 2 entries, X and 11, because can't have consistent lettering for the sake of anything. Sonya Blade and Johnny Cage actually got together for a bit, had a kid, Cassie Cage, who was head of the Combat Kids, was in charge of the next generation. Since this game, new storyline takes over 20 years later instead of just a few years, I assume, by the original games. My personal favorite is the new dynamic between Sub-Zero and Scorpion being cool with each other now. Just want everyone to know that you should all hate Deborah with a passion since she sucks, and I don't need to explain to you why, just hate her. But with all the reboots being canonized thanks to MK11, that explains that Chronica resetting the timeline over and over again, which just goes to show how the story kind of just started to fall apart at this point. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. But MK1 seems to have reset the timeline, but instead of just retelling events, whole new characters and factions are being swapped and changed. Since this game will come out, I won't spoil anything, but just know it looks interesting and worth checking out if you ever get the chance. In conclusion, this game rocks, and you should definitely go buy it and get it off the black market. Joking, of course, but realistically speaking, this game has been obliterated from any digital store thanks to Freddy Krueger of all things. But if you own an Xbox 360, or PS3 and could get a copy off of eBay. I've been playing on a consistent basis. It's my second favorite Mortal Kombat game. Second to only MK11 since my friends refused to play with me. Real tragedy. But if I had to decide games I'm ranking, it would go MK11 since the story and gameplay mechanics are really lackluster. MKX because the story and gameplay are good, but just a little more just polish and pizzazz that can make it just that much greater. And number 1 goes to MK9. 9 since almost everything about this game is perfect, and as a straight male, I won't lie, the females this time are very interestingly designed and dressed. When it all comes together, I seriously do believe that if it was not for Mortal Kombat 9, this game series would not be as popular and influential as it is now. And the team at NetherRealm really pulled their A game for this game. And I won't lie when I say MK1 looks to be a major step up from MK11. That's all I have for today, and hope you have a good one.